Right. Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to the Office of the Treasurer and Tax Collector Empty Homes Tax webinar. Before we begin, here are some housekeeping items. Language interpretation is available in Cantonese. To enable language interpretation, click the interpretation icon or select the More button at the bottom of your screen and select Chinese. To activate closed caption, select the closed caption icon or select the More button at the bottom of your screen. Today's webinar will be recorded. This recorded webinar will be available on our website at sftreasurer.org, as well as translated PowerPoint slides in Chinese, Spanish, and Filipino. We respect all participants in this convening today and want to create a safe space for all. By default, all participants will be muted and video is disabled. Video will be on for speakers only. To submit questions, please select the Q&A button at the bottom of your screen. For those of you who just joined, welcome. My name is Hafiza Salabai, and today I will be sharing with you what the empty homes tax is, how the tax works, who is required to file, and who is required to pay. We understand that many of you have strong feelings about this tax. This tax was passed by San Francisco voters in 2022, and our job today, and as we implement this tax, is to make it as easy as possible for you to comply. We received a lot of questions via registration for this webinar. Most of the questions will be answered during this presentation. However, please note that the Office of the Treasurer and Tax Collector can only provide general information. We do not advise customers on detailed tax matters, including ordinance interpretations, or give tax advice for a specific tax situation. With that, let's get started. What is the empty homes tax? The empty homes tax was approved by San Francisco voters on November 8, 2022, and became effective on January 1st, 2024. It is a tax imposed on keeping certain residential units vacant for more than 182 days in a calendar year. For this tax, vacant is defined as unoccupied, uninhabited, or unused for more than 182 days in a calendar year. This is regardless of whether the 182 days are consecutive or not. There are specific types of vacancies that don't count towards the 182 days, and we will review those later in this presentation. We will now provide an overview of the empty homes tax. The tax deadline for most owners will be April 30th each year, beginning on April 30th, 2025. However, if you sell or transfer a unit, you are required to file within 45 days of the sale or transfer. If you own a single-family home or a duplex, you are exempt from the tax with respect to those properties. If you own a condo in a building with 3 or more residential units, you generally are subject to the tax unless the condo is your principal place of residence and you have a valid homeowner's exemption for the entire tax filing year. We received several questions asking if you must file even if your property was not vacant. Keep in mind that similar to your income taxes, if you own a property subject to the empty homes tax, you will be required to file annually, even if you don't have any vacancies. Filing doesn't mean you owe the tax, but it provides the information the city needs to calculate what you owe. Our goal is to make this filing process as easy as possible. Beginning in 2025, you will file and pay annually by April 30th. It's important to remember that if you sell or transfer a unit, you must file and pay within 45 days of the sale. Are you required to file the empty homes tax? This is another question that a lot of you asked. If you own a residential unit in a building with 3 or more residential units, you generally are required to file. A residential unit is defined in the law as a house, an apartment, a mobile home, a group of rooms, or a single room that is designed as separate living quarters, subject to limited exceptions. Units occupied or intended primarily for travelers, vacationers, or other transient occupants are not considered residential units for this tax. However, if you live in a condo that you own, it is your principal place of residence, and you have a valid homeowner's exemption for the entire tax filing year, you are not required to file or pay the empty homes tax. This is a new tax, and our data about your units will not be perfect. If you receive a notification to file from our office, you must respond. If you believe the notification was sent in error, the filing form will give you the option to tell us why you are exempt from filing. This is a simple process that generally takes less than 5 minutes. If you own and occupy your home as your principal place of residence, you may be eligible for an exemption for up to $7,000 off the property's assessed value, resulting in a property tax savings of approximately $70 to $80 annually. If you have a valid homeowner's exemption and the unit is your principal place of residence for the entire year, you are not required to file the empty homes tax. To apply for a homeowner's exemption, visit SFGovTV and click on the tax savings drop menu. Next, click on homeowner's exemption. Now locate the tab for forms and attachments. You will then see a list of forms. Scroll down the page to find the homeowner's exemption claim form. Download, complete, and return the form to the office of the assessor recorder by email, regular mail, or in person. Please note, if you apply for a homeowner's exemption by February 15th, you can receive a full property tax exemption for the fiscal year commencing July 1st that year. You cannot apply for the prior year. If you have questions about your homeowner's exemption status, please contact the Office of the Assessor Recorder. Okay, back to the filing itself. The online filing will require you to share your business account number. Businesses receive a 7-digit business account number, also known as the BAND, when they register. You do not need to register as a business if your only business is receiving rental income in connection with the operation of any of the following: a cooperative housing corporation, one residential structure consisting of fewer than 4 units, or one residential condominium. To learn more, visit sftreasurer.org/registration. If you do not have a business account number, the form will prompt you to create an account for the purpose of filing this tax. Additionally, you will be required to share information about the status of the unit or units you owned during the calendar year so we can calculate if you owe any tax. For the filing due in April 2025, it would be for the period January 1st, 2024 through December 31st, 2024. This will include information such as block and lot, square footage of the residential units, number of vacant days, and number of vacancy exclusion days, if applicable. We will now go over who must pay, how to calculate the tax, and exclusion periods that may apply to the empty homes tax. When you file, you may owe tax for units that were vacant for more than 182 days in a calendar year. What counts as a vacant day? This is another question that many of you asked. To know this, we need to first understand what vacant means. Vacant is defined as unoccupied, uninhabited, or unused for more than 182 days in a calendar year. regardless of whether it's consecutive or not. A unit is not considered vacant if it is leased to a tenant under a bona fide lease intended for occupancy. This excludes leases to a co-owner or former co-owner, to a related person or affiliate of the owner, co-owner, or former co-owner, and to travelers, vacationers, or other transient occupants. We will now review other specific types of vacancies that don't count towards the 182 days for the tax. These are known in the law as vacancy exclusion periods. If any of these periods apply, those days will be disregarded when calculating the number of vacant days. Let's go over each of these periods. A residential unit will not be considered vacant during the building permit application period. This is the period during the application and approval process for the first building permit for repairs or construction for each residential unit up to a maximum of 1 year. A residential unit will also not be considered vacant during the construction period and new construction period. The construction period is the 1 year period after the city issues the first building permit for repair, rehabilitation, or construction with respect to the residential unit. And the new construction period is the 1 year period after the city issues a certificate of final completion and occupancy to a residential unit in a newly built building or a newly added residential unit in an existing building. A residential unit is not considered to be kept vacant during the disaster period, which is a 2-year period following severe damage to a residential unit for a catastrophic event that made the residential unit uninhabitable or unusable. The final vacancy exclusion periods we will go over are the owner death period and owner in care period. A residential unit is not considered to be kept vacant during the owner death period, which is for a co-owner or a decedent's estate, heirs, or beneficiaries. The period following the death of an owner who was the sole occupant of the residential unit up to the longer of 1 year, or the period during which the residential unit is subject to the authority of the probate court. Finally, a residential unit is not considered to be kept vacant during the owner in care period. This is the period when all occupants that use the residential unit as their principal residence reside in certain care facilities. To summarize, these vacancy exclusion periods will not be counted when calculating the number of vacant days. Once you provide the square footage of the residential units, number of vacant days, and any vacancy exclusion days, the form will calculate your empty homes tax amount due. The empty homes tax is calculated based on the size of a residential unit that is kept vacant for more than 182 days. If your unit was vacant in 2024 for more than 182 days, you will owe taxes based on the size of the unit as follows: $2,500 for each residential unit with square footage less than 1,000, $3,500 for each residential unit with square footage from 1,000 to 2,000, and $5,000 for each residential unit with square footage greater than 2,000. Units that remain vacant will be subject to increasing tax rates in subsequent years. Next, we will share a few scenarios to help you better understand the empty homes tax. Scenario 1. Miss Yan owns a single condo in a building with 4 units and has a tenant under a bona fide lease intended for occupancy for all of 2024. The tenant is not a co-owner or former co-owner, is not related to Miss Yan, or a co-owner or former co-owner and is not a traveler, vacationer, or other transient occupant. Does she have to file or pay the empty homes tax? For this scenario, it's important to understand the definition of lease period, which is when the unit is leased to a tenant under a bona fide lease intended for occupancy. Excluding leases to a co-owner or former co-owner, to a related person or affiliate of the co-owner or former co-owner, and to travelers, vacationers, or other transient occupants. To answer the question, Ms. Yen must complete an home tax filing because she owns a condo in a building that has 3 or more units. Even though she qualified for the lease period for the entire year and does not owe the tax, she still must file. She will receive a notice from the Office of the Treasurer and Tax Collector instructing her to file. However, if she does not file, the office is required to assume that her condo is vacant for the entire year. Scenario 2. Miss Yan owns a single condo in a building with 4 units and leased the condo to her brother, who occupied the condo for all of 2024. Does she have to file or pay the empty homes tax? Scenario is similar to scenario 1, except the condo is leased to Miss Yan's brother. However, for this scenario as well, Miss Yan will need to file, but will not owe tax because the property was occupied, even though the lease period did not apply. Scenario 3. Ms. Chang owns an apartment building with 11 units. Each unit is 1,200 square feet. 8 units were occupied for all of 2024. 3 units were vacant for 7 months of 2024, and no vacancy exclusion periods applied to them. Is Ms. Chang required to file and pay the empty homes tax? Ms. Chang will need to complete one filing for the 11 units and will owe $3,500 for each of the 3 vacant units, for a total of $10,500. Scenario 4. Mr. Seagram owns a house with 2 units. He resides in 1 unit and the second unit was vacant for more than 6 months in 2024. Is Mr. Seagram required to file and pay the empty homes tax? To answer this, Mr. Seagram is exempt from filing or paying the tax for this building because the building only has 2 residential units. However, if Mr. Seagram receives a notice from our office, he must file to let us know that he is exempt. Scenario 5. Mr. Ryder owns an apartment building with 10 units. 8 units were occupied for all of 2024, and 2 were vacant because they were severely damaged and rendered uninhabitable in a fire in January 2024. Is Mr. Ryder required to file or pay the empty homes tax? Mr. Ryder will need to file, but will not have to pay the empty homes tax because the 2 units that were vacant for more than 182 days qualify for the disaster vacancy exclusion period, and 8 units were occupied for the entire year. Scenario 6. Mr. Montgomery owns a condo in a 12-unit building, and it was his principal place of residence for all of 2024. He also had a valid homeowners exemption for the entire year. Is Mr. Montgomery required to file? For this scenario, it is important to understand homeowners exemption. If you own a condo in a building with 3 or more residential units, you generally are required to file unless the unit is your principal place of residence and you have a valid homeowner's exemption for the entire tax filing year. To answer this question, Mr. Montgomery will not have to file because he had a valid homeowner's exemption and the condo was his principal place of residence for the entire tax filing year. However, if he receives a notice from our office, he must respond and let us know that he is exempt. Moving on to Q&A. We received a wealth of questions both during this presentation and in advance. Many of the questions that you shared with us were addressed during this presentation. However, we can't answer them all today. We have recorded all the questions we received in the Q&A today, as well as the ones we received via registration, and we'll continue to post answers on our website. The next slides will highlight the most frequently asked questions. Okay, so some of the common questions we received are related to tenancy in common questions. The first question here is, if a unit is owned in a tenancy in common apartment complex, would each of the unit owners be required to file separately, or would the property manager file for the entire complex? To answer this question, one filing is acceptable. Another common tenancy in common question received was if a tax is owed for one or more of the units in a tenancy in common complex, who was responsible to pay the tax? So to answer this question, all co-owners are jointly and severely liable. All owners of a tenancy in common are common owners. If one of the units was found to owe the tax and failed to pay, all the owners would be held liable. Next question is related to mixed-use property. If the property is a mixed-use property building, and there is one commercial unit on the ground floor and 10 residential units upstairs, is the property subject to the empty homes tax? So the answer to this question is that residential units are subject to the empty homes tax, but not the commercial unit. Unless otherwise exempt from the tax, the owners of the residential units must file a return, and if any residential unit is vacant for more than 182 days in the tax year, the owners of the unit will owe the tax. The next topic is second homes. This is the most frequently asked topic. Are second homes pied-à-terre subject to empty homes tax? Answer to this question is that if the home is in a building with 3 or more units, the owner must file a return. Additionally, if the home is kept vacant for more than 182 days in the tax year and no vacancy exclusion periods apply, the owner will owe the tax. For this tax, vacant is defined as unoccupied, uninhabited, or unused for more than 182 days, whether consecutive or non-consecutive in a tax year. Family-related questions is another most frequently asked topic. If a home is used part-time throughout the year by owner or family members who work in the city or for visiting local family members, does the empty homes tax apply? To answer this question, if the home is in a building with 3 or more units, the owner must file a return. If the home is unoccupied, uninhabited, or unused for more than 182 days, consecutive or non-consecutive, and no vacancy exclusion period applies, the owner will have to pay the empty homes tax. If a related person occupies, inhabits, or uses the home is not vacant for those days. This is also another common family-related question. My parents live in our condo full-time without a lease. Are we subject to the empty homes tax? To answer this question, if you have a related person or any other person living in your condo full-time, even without a lease, then you will not owe the tax, but you are still required to file. And finally, litigation. Many of you are aware that there is a pending empty homes tax litigation and are wondering what the potential outcomes may be. We understand your concerns about the pending litigation regarding the empty homes tax. We are obligated to collect the tax as required by law unless a court orders us to stop. If you're interested in learning more about the details of the lawsuit, visit the San Francisco Superior Court website at sf.courts.ca.gov. Click on case information and search case number CGC-23-604-600. Well, that's all for today. Thank you all for joining the Empty Homes Tax webinar. We hope this webinar helped you better understand the tax. And as a reminder, a recording of this webinar, as well as translated PowerPoint slides in Chinese, Spanish, and Filipino, will be available on our website, sftreasure.org/emptyhomes. Thank you again and have a good evening.